The crowd inside the alien hall roared like a storm. Hundreds of creatures with scales, claws, and glowing eyes filled the tiered seats, each one waiting for the auction to begin. The room was lit with bright golden lights, shining down on a single cage at the center of the stage. Inside stood a young alien girl with shimmering blue skin, delicate features, and eyes that carried both fear and defiance. Chains bound her wrists, but her posture remained strong, as if she refused to break even in front of so many bidders. A towering reptilian auctioneer raised his hand, and the crowd grew quiet. His wide mouth stretched into a cruel smile as he spoke in a booming voice that echoed through the hall. The jewel of the night, rare, beautiful, untouched. Who dares begin the bidding for her freedom? His words carried mockery, as though the girl's value was nothing but a game. Among the sea of alien bidders, one figure stood out. A human man, rough in appearance, with a beard darkened by dust and scars across his arms. His clothes were torn from travel, his boots worn thin and his pockets nearly empty. Yet his eyes burned with a determination that silenced his own doubts. His name was Elias, a wanderer who had crossed galaxies not for riches but for something he could not explain. And when he saw the girl in the cage, something inside him snapped awake. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the silence. "I bid." Laughter exploded across the chamber. The reptilian auctioneer leaned over the podium, hissing with amusement. A human dares to bid? With what, empty pockets? He waved a clawed hand toward Elias. Look at him. No wealth, no treasure, not even armor worth salvaging. The crowd joined in the laughter, their cruel voices echoing as if the walls themselves mocked the human. But Elias did not move. He raised his hand higher, ignoring the stares, ignoring the ridicule. His eyes stayed locked on the girl in the cage. She met his gaze, and though she said nothing, her lips trembled. It was not a smile, but it was not despair either. It was hope struggling to breathe. Other bidders began to shout their offers, jewels that glowed like suns, crates of weapons forged on dying stars, vaults of credits large enough to buy moons. The numbers soared, the energy of the hall building like a thunderstorm. Elias remained still, his jaw set. The auctioneer sneered at him every time he spoke of wealth, knowing the human had none to match. "You cannot play in this game," the reptilian barked, pointing a claw at him. "This is a hall for rulers, not beggars." But Elias's voice cut through again. "I bid still." The hall went quiet. For a moment, the crowd turned restless. Why did he not break? Why did he keep standing, knowing he had nothing? The auctioneer narrowed his eyes. "And what, human, will you give when your pockets are empty? What is left for you to offer that can rival empires?" Elias's chest rose as he drew in a deep breath. His voice came low but carried to every corner of the hall. "My life." The silence after those words was heavier than stone. Even the girl inside the cage stepped closer to the bars, her eyes wide. The crowd of aliens murmured in disbelief. To offer life itself was madness. To give it for a slave, for someone unknown, was beyond reason. Yet Elias did not flinch. His gaze never left her, as though she was the only one in the room who mattered. The auctioneer stared at him with a twisted grin, both mocking and curious. "Your life for hers? Foolish human. What value does one fragile existence hold in this galaxy?" Elias's answer was simple. "Enough." The hall erupted again, but not with laughter. Now it was chaos, whispers, arguments, and disbelief. The auctioneer slammed his claw against the podium, trying to regain order, but all eyes remained on the human who dared to challenge a galaxy with nothing but himself. And in that moment, the girl in the cage looked at him not with fear, but with a spark of something new. A silent bond had been forged, though no one yet knew where it would lead. The alien auctioneer's grin widened, sharp teeth glinting in the light. He leaned forward on his podium, his scaled hand pressing down with authority. "Your life, human? Very well, let the crowd decide if such an offer is worthy." His voice carried like thunder, and the hall filled with hisses, laughter, and murmurs of disbelief. Around Elias, the bidders shouted their scorn. Some aliens mocked him for being weak, Others called for his execution on the spot, and many laughed at the thought that a single human would dare to trade himself for one of their most valuable prizes. Yet in the chaos, a strange hush began to spread. Some creatures stared at Elias with curiosity, as if they could not look away from the madness of his words. Inside the cage, the blue-skinned girl pressed her hands to the bars. Her lips parted, as though she wanted to speak, but her voice was lost beneath the noise of the crowd. Her eyes locked on Elias, wide with both fear and something deeper, something rising in her that she did not yet understand. The auctioneer slammed his claw on the podium again. Silence. The hall quieted instantly. His gaze swept the crowd before returning to Elias. Then it shall be so. The human bids his life. No jewel, no fortune, no empire can match such a reckless gift. Do we accept? A roar came back from the audience. Some shouted yes, eager for the drama. Others shouted no, furious that the bidding could end with nothing gained. The reptilian auctioneer raised his hands, savoring the chaos before speaking again. Very well, let it be decided. If the human wishes to pay with his life, then he must prove its worth. A trial. The hall stirred again. Whispers of violence, of games, of cruel entertainment filled the air. The auctioneer's smile grew cruel. You will not die here, human. Not yet. Instead, you will fight for her freedom, survive, and she is yours. Fall, and both your lives end together. Elias did not flinch. His hand lowered slowly, but his eyes burned brighter than before. I accept. The crowd erupted in cheers and jeers, the sound rolling like a storm against the walls. Guards in heavy armor marched forward, dragging the cage with the alien girl away from the stage. She was pulled toward a shadowed corridor, her eyes never leaving Elias until the last moment before she disappeared into the dark. For a second, Elias felt the weight of her absence, as though her gaze alone had given him strength. Chains were thrown at his feet. Alien guards gestured for him to bind his own wrists, but Elias kicked them aside. I walk free until I fall, he said. His voice, calm and steady, echoed in the silence that followed. Even the guards hesitated before stepping back. The auctioneer raised his hand again. Bring the first challenger. From the shadows of the arena floor, a hulking figure stepped forward. It was twice the height of Elias, with skin like cracked stone and glowing yellow eyes. Its arms were thick as tree trunks, and each fist carried the weight of iron. The crowd cheered wildly as the creature roared, shaking the ground beneath its feet. Elias took a slow breath. He had no armor, no weapon, and no allies. Only his will. But inside his chest, his heart pounded with a fire he had never felt before. He was not just fighting for survival. He was fighting for her. The stone-skinned beast charged, its steps heavy like falling meteors. Elias stood firm until the last second, then rolled aside, the ground cracking where the monster struck. Dust and sparks flew. The crowd gasped, then cheered louder. Elias rose, sweat glistening on his skin, his eyes sharp. The monster turned to face him, snarling with rage. The fight had only just begun, but already Elias felt something strange. Strength, born not from his body but from his resolve. He clenched his fists, ready to face the impossible. The beast towered over Elias, its cracked stone skin glowing faintly with molten veins of fire. The crowd howled for blood, stomping their feet and shaking the walls of the arena. The reptilian auctioneer leaned forward, his cruel smile wide. Show us, human. Show us if your life is worth more than dust. The monster swung its massive fist, the air cutting with the force of its blow. Elias ducked low, rolling across the dirt as the fist smashed into the ground, sending shards of stone flying. Pain shot through his shoulder as he landed hard, but he forced himself up before the second strike came. His heart pounded. He had faced soldiers before, even beasts on ruined worlds, but never something like this. The stone creature roared, a sound that shook the air, then charged again. Elias sprinted to the side, weaving between the beast's legs, his instincts sharper than fear. The crowd roared louder, some mocking, some cheering. They had come for blood, but the longer he lasted, the more their curiosity grew. High above, in a balcony shadowed by golden light, The cage carrying the alien girl had been locked in place. She pressed her face to the bars, eyes wide as she watched. She whispered words no one could hear, her lips shaping silent prayers. She had expected the human to die quickly. She had expected him to break like so many before. But with each dodge, each desperate move, her hope grew stronger. Elias knew he could not win with strength. His arms would shatter if he tried to match the creature's blows. He had only speed, wit, and the will burning inside him. He circled the arena, drawing the beast's attention, waiting for the right moment. The monster's footsteps cracked the ground with every step, each impact sending tremors up his legs. The auctioneer laughed. "Run, little human. Run until you fall." His voice dripped with mockery, but beneath it, his eyes narrowed. He had seen humans fight before, but something about this one felt different. The beast lunged again, swinging both fists down. Elias dove forward, sliding under its arms as the ground erupted behind him. He grabbed a shard of broken stone, sharp as a blade, and rose quickly. He slashed at the back of the beast's leg, the edge digging between cracks of molten flesh. The creature roared in fury, stumbling to one knee. The crowd gasped, then roared louder than before. The noise was deafening, a storm of voices rising and crashing against the arena walls. Elias tightened his grip on the shard, sweat dripping into his eyes. He knew the wound was small, barely a scratch compared to the monster's size, but it was proof he could hurt it. The beast turned, its glowing eyes burning with rage. It slammed its fists into the ground, sending a shockwave that knocked Elias off his feet. His chest hit the dirt, air rushing out of his lungs. For a moment, his vision blurred. The monster loomed above him, ready to crush him with a final blow. But then he saw her, the girl in the cage, her hands gripping the bars, her eyes locked on him. She mouthed a single word, though he could not hear it. "Fight." Elias rolled just as the massive fist struck where he had been lying, dust exploding in all directions. He scrambled to his feet, his body screaming with pain, his mind refusing to yield. The shard of stone still rested in his hand, slick with his own blood from the cut it had left in his palm. He charged. The crowd gasped as the human ran directly at the beast. The monster raised its arm to crush him, but Elias slid low, again, plunging the shard into the wound he had already made. The creature howled, stumbling, its leg buckling beneath its massive weight. Elias climbed onto its back before it could recover, gripping the glowing cracks in its stone flesh like handholds. The heat burned his skin, but he held on. His teeth gritted. With a final desperate cry, he drove the shard deep into the beast's glowing spine. The monster roared one last time, then collapsed with a thunderous crash that shook the arena floor. Dust filled the air, the ground trembling beneath the fallen giant. For a long moment, the hall was silent. Then the crowd erupted, their voices shaking the walls, their roars a mix of awe and disbelief. The human had survived. Elias staggered to his feet, covered in dust and blood, his chest heaving with every breath. He looked up at the cage, meeting the girl's eyes again. She was no longer whispering. She was staring at him with something fierce, something unspoken, but it burned brighter than fear. The auctioneer slammed his claw against the podium. His grin was gone. His eyes burned with something else now. Anger, but also calculation. 1. Fight is not enough. If you want her freedom, human, then you will face another. And the crowd roared for more. The arena floor was still shaking from the fall of the stone-skinned beast. Dust drifted through the golden lights, curling in the heated air as the crowd's roar thundered above. Elias stood with his chest heaving, his body marked with cuts and bruises, his hand still gripping the shard that had brought down the monster. The reptilian auctioneer pounded the podium with a clawed hand, his voice cutting through the chaos. One victory does not buy freedom. The crowd demands more. The human must face the next challenge. His words dripped with delight, feeding the hunger of the audience. They roared back, chanting for more blood, their voices blending into a deafening storm. Guards dragged the beast's lifeless body out of the arena, leaving deep scars in the floor. From the shadows of the gate, another sound rose, a growl, high-pitched and layered, like a chorus of predators. Then they appeared, Not one, but three creatures. They moved low to the ground, their bodies sleek and scaled, their eyes glowing red. Each jaw split wide to reveal rows of needle-sharp teeth, dripping with venom that hissed as it touched the dirt. The crowd cheered wildly, stamping their feet in rhythm. Tear him apart! Tear him apart! Elias tightened his grip on the shard of stone, though his hand shook from the strain. His body screamed for rest, every muscle aching after the first battle. He forced himself to steady his breathing, to stand tall. Above, in the balcony, he saw the girl pressed against the bars of her cage. Her eyes blazed with fear, but she did not look away. She had not looked away once. The auctioneer's grin widened. Let us see if the human's life is still worth her freedom. He gestured with a claw, and the beasts leapt forward. They came fast, faster than Elias expected. He dove to the side as the first lunged, its teeth snapping just inches from his throat. The second circled behind him, and the third stalked in front. Their movements coordinated like hunters trained to kill together. Dust rose in clouds as they closed in, their growls echoing like drums. Elias backed toward the wall, his shard trembling in his grip. His mind raced. If he tried to fight them head-on, he would be torn apart in seconds. He had to outthink them, had to use more than brute strength. He crouched low, his eyes darting between the three predators. The first beast lunged again. Elias sidestepped and slammed his shard into its shoulder, the stone blade cracking against bone. The creature shrieked, its blood glowing like fire as it stumbled. But before Elias could recover, the second beast struck from behind, claws raking across his back. He cried out in pain, spinning to face it, his shirt torn and blood streaming down his skin. The crowd screamed louder, feeding on the sight of his struggle. Some cheered for his death, others shouted for him to rise. The noise was a storm pressing against his skull, but he pushed it aside. All he heard was the echo of the girl's silent word from before, fight. The wounded beast lunged again, blood trailing behind it. Elias dropped low, grabbing a broken chain left from the arena floor. With a desperate swing, he looped the chain around the creature's neck and pulled hard. The beast thrashed, claws raking the ground, but Elias held on, muscles burning as he dragged it closer. With one final pull, he slammed the shard into its chest. The creature went limp, collapsing in a heap of scales and dust, but the other two were already upon him. One knocked him to the ground, teeth snapping just above his face. Elias shoved the shard into its mouth, the edges slicing as the beast bit down. Blood sprayed, the creature shrieking in fury as it staggered back, its jaw shattered. The third beast leapt, claws outstretched. Elias rolled, his body barely moving fast enough. Pain shot through his ribs where its claws scraped him, but he forced himself up again, sweat and blood mixing on his skin. His vision blurred for a moment, but he steadied himself, feet planted, chest heaving. The crowd had gone wild, their roars shaking the very air. Even the auctioneer leaned forward, eyes wide with excitement he could not hide. Elias raised the shard once more, battered but unbroken. He faced the final beast, blood dripping from his wounds, his heart pounding like war drums. Above, the girl's eyes glowed with a fire that matched his own. She pressed her hand to the bars as though willing her strength into him. The beast circled, growling, waiting for the perfect strike. Elias did not wait. He charged first, his roar echoing through the arena, not like prey, but like a predator who refused to die. The last beast circled Elias, its body low, its glowing red eyes fixed on him. The arena shook with the sound of the crowd chanting for blood. Elias's lungs burned, every breath sharp with pain. His back throbbed where the claws had torn into him, and his hands ached from gripping the stone shard until it cut into his palm. He knew his body was at its limit, but his spirit refused to yield. The creature sprang, faster than his eyes could follow. Elias dropped low, the beast's claws slicing through the air above him. Dust flew up as it landed behind him, spinning with a snarl. The crowd roared in delight, their voices merging into a storm of noise. But Elias blocked it out. His focus narrowed only on the beast, on the rhythm of its movements, the way its muscles tensed before each strike. He shifted his stance, lowering himself as though he was prey, daring it to lunge again. The beast hissed, its tail whipping against the ground. Then it pounced, its jaws wide, its teeth flashing in the light. Elias rolled aside, his shard slicing across its neck as it passed. The blade cut deep, glowing blood spraying into the air. The beast stumbled, but it was not finished. Elias's knees trembled as he rose. His body begged him to stop, but he pushed forward, gripping the shard tighter. He rushed at the beast before it could recover. With a shout that ripped from his chest, he slammed the shard deep into the wound at its neck. The creature shrieked, thrashing violently, but Elias held on, twisting the shard until its body fell limp in a cloud of dust. The arena fell into silence for a heartbeat. Then the crowd erupted louder than ever before. The sound was deafening, shaking the walls, a storm of disbelief and awe. A single human had brought down 3 predators bred to kill, and still he stood, bloodied, trembling, but unbroken. Above, in the golden cage, the girl pressed her face to the bars, tears glimmering in her eyes. She whispered again, though no one could hear it but herself. "Live." Elias dropped to one knee, his chest heaving. His vision blurred as he wiped sweat and blood from his eyes. Every part of his body screamed for rest. But he forced himself to rise again, standing tall before the crowd. He lifted the shard high, showing them he was not done. The roar that followed shook the entire hall. The auctioneer narrowed his eyes, his grin no longer playful. His claws tapped against the podium as he studied the human. This was no ordinary man. This was something dangerous, something the crowd was beginning to admire. That admiration was a threat. If the human became more than entertainment, if he became a symbol, then control would slip. The reptilian auctioneer's smile returned, colder this time. "Impressive," he hissed, his voice echoing. "But your life is not yet enough. If you want her freedom, you must survive the final test." His claw pointed toward the balcony where the girl's cage hung. The crowd gasped, whispers racing like fire through the stands. The cage began to lower, descending slowly toward the arena floor. The girl clung to the bars, her eyes locked on Elias as though nothing else existed. Chains rattled as the cage stopped above the dirt. Guards surrounded it, their weapons drawn, their armor glinting in the golden light. The auctioneer spread his arms. "The girl is the prize, but she will not be given. To claim her, human, you must face my champion." A massive gate creaked open, the sound of grinding metal filling the air. From the darkness, footsteps echoed, slow, deliberate, heavy as thunder. The crowd hushed, their excitement turning into a tense silence. Even the air seemed to grow colder. The figure stepped into the light. He was no beast. He was a warrior, towering and armored in dark steel, his eyes burning with the same fire as the monsters Elias had slain. In his hands, he carried a weapon, unlike any Elias had seen, a blade that shimmered with an energy sharp enough to slice through stone. The crowd erupted again, chanting one word over and over. "Champion, champion, champion." Elias stood straight, his shard still in his hand, though it looked like nothing compared to the weapon his new opponent carried. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, but his eyes did not waver. Above him, the girl gripped the bars tighter, her voice lost in the roar but her gaze burning with unshaken belief. Elias whispered under his breath, steadying his heart. "One more." The champion raised his blade in salute. The final trial had begun. The champion stood at the center of the arena, his armored body gleaming under the golden lights. His weapon hummed with strange energy, the edges glowing as though alive. The crowd had fallen into an uneasy silence, their chants dying into whispers. This was no wild beast for entertainment. This was the executioner, chosen to crush the human, in front of them all. Elias's grip tightened around the shard of stone in his hand. It felt pitiful compared to the champion's blade, yet it was all he had. His body ached with pain, wounds burning across his back and arms, but he forced his feet to stand firm. Above him, the cage hung low, the girl's hands gripping the bars, her lips moving in silent words only he could read. "Don't stop." The auctioneer's voice echoed like thunder. "Champion, Show the human the price of his arrogance. The armored warrior raised his blade in salute, then struck the ground with its tip. Sparks flew. The sound vibrated through the air like a war drum. Slowly he began to advance. Elias circled, his eyes never leaving his opponent. Every step felt heavy, but his mind was sharp, searching for weakness. He remembered how the beasts had moved, how the stone giant had fallen. Each fight had been impossible, yet he had survived. Now he faced something different. A warrior who could think, who could adapt. The champion struck first. The glowing blade cut the air, a streak of light that nearly split Elias in two. He dove aside, rolling across the dirt as the weapon sliced deep into the ground. The impact left a glowing scar in the arena floor. Elias scrambled to his feet, sweat dripping from his brow. One wrong move and that blade would end him. The crowd roared as the champion pressed forward, each swing fast and brutal. Elias dodged, ducked, rolled, but the cuts came closer each time. His shard was useless against the armored plates. His chest burned with exhaustion. Still, he refused to fall. He darted in, aiming for the gaps in the armor. His shard scraped against the warrior's arm, but the blade came back too fast. Elias barely leapt away, the heat of the weapon grazing his side. The smell of burned fabric and skin filled his nose. Pain tore through him, but he gritted his teeth, forcing himself to keep moving. Above, the girl slammed her hands against the bars. "Fight," she shouted, her voice carrying faintly over the roar. For the first time, Elias heard her. That single word lit a fire in his chest. The champion swung again, this time a wide arc meant to cleave him in half. Elias ducked low, rolling forward under the strike, and slammed his shard into the warrior's knee joint. Sparks flew as the stone cracked metal. The champion staggered, just for a second, but it was enough. Elias pushed his advantage, striking again at the weak point. The champion growled, his armored boot lashing out, catching Elias in the chest. The blow sent him sprawling across the arena, gasping for air. He tasted blood, his ribs screaming with pain. His shard slipped from his hand, clattering across the dirt. The crowd erupted, chanting for the champion to finish him. The auctioneer leaned forward, his grin wide, convinced the fight was already over. The champion marched toward Elias, blade raised high, but Elias's eyes flicked to the ground, to the glowing scar left by the blade's earlier strike. The stone around it had cracked, still glowing faintly with heat. An idea sparked in his mind. As the champion swung down, Elias rolled aside, snatching up his shard. He darted back toward the glowing crack, planting his feet against the heat. The warrior turned, blade ready, but Elias did not retreat. He charged. The crowd gasped as the human sprinted straight at the armored giant. At the last second, Elias dropped low, sliding across the glowing scar. The heat seared his skin, but he endured it. With all his strength, he drove the shard upward, into the champion's exposed joint beneath the arm. The shard pierced. The champion roared, staggering, his blade crashing into the dirt. Sparks and dust exploded. Elias clung to the shard, twisting it deeper. The crowd roared with disbelief, their voices shaking the arena. The champion fell to one knee, his armor cracked, his blade trembling. Elias stood, his chest heaving, blood dripping down his arms, but his eyes fierce. He had not won yet, but he had shown the galaxy that he would not break. The girl in the cage pressed her forehead to the bars, her voice trembling but clear. "You can do it." And Elias, beaten and scarred, nodded once. He would not stop. Not now. The champion's growl echoed through the arena, low and furious. His armored hand clutched at the shard embedded in his side, sparks flying where stone scraped against living steel. Elias staggered backward, his chest rising and falling in ragged breaths. His arms shook with exhaustion, but his eyes did not waver. The crowd was no longer laughing. Their chants had shifted. Some shouted for the champion to end it, others called for the human to rise again. The arena trembled with their divided voices, a storm of rage and awe. The auctioneer slammed his claw against the podium. "Finish him." His voice carried the weight of command, trying to pull control back into his hands. The champion rose slowly, towering even as one knee buckled. His glowing blade hummed louder, rage pouring into each step. He charged, the ground shaking with his weight, blade raised high for a killing strike. Elias gripped the shard tighter. Though the stone was cracked and slick with his blood, he knew one blow would kill him. His body screamed at him to stop, to give in, but he forced his feet to move. He ran straight at the champion. The crowd gasped. The champion swung downward, the glowing blade cutting the air like lightning. Elias dropped low at the last second, the heat burning his back as the blade tore through the ground. Dust and sparks exploded. Using the opening, Elias rolled forward, rising behind the warrior. With a roar, he drove the shard deep into the joint. At the back of the armor's knee, the champion howled, collapsing to one knee again. The arena shook as his massive body hit the dirt. Elias tore the shard free, blood and sparks bursting from the wound. He staggered back, barely able to breathe, his vision blurring at the edges. The champion spun, striking out with his massive fist. The blow connected, sending Elias flying across the arena. He crashed into the dirt, his chest burning with agony, the taste of iron filling his mouth. For a moment, the world went black. Above, the girl screamed, her voice carrying clear over the crowd. "Get up!" Elias opened his eyes. He pushed his trembling hands into the dirt, forcing his broken body upright. His ribs screamed with each breath, his arms barely able to lift the shard, but he rose. He would not let her voice be the last thing he heard. The champion limped toward him, blade dragging against the ground, sparks showering with every step. His armor was cracked, glowing with damage, but his power was still terrifying. The crowd fell into silence, every eye locked on the human standing against a giant. Elias steadied himself, his legs trembling beneath him. He waited as the champion raised the blade for the final strike. At the last moment, Elias lunged forward, straight into the attack. The glowing blade sliced across his side, blood spraying, but Elias ignored the agony. He drove the shard upward with all his strength, plunging it into the exposed crack at the champion's chest. The shard sank deep. The champion froze, his roar caught in his throat. The glowing light of his blade flickered, then dimmed. Sparks rained down as he staggered, dropping the weapon. His armored body shook once, then collapsed with a thunderous crash that shook the entire arena floor. Elias fell to his knees beside the fallen giant, his chest heaving, blood pouring from his wounds. The shard slipped from his hand, broken into pieces. He could barely lift his head, but when he did, he looked up at the girl in the cage. She was crying, her hands gripping the bars so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. The arena was silent. No cheers, no chants, only the sound of Elias gasping for breath. The auctioneer's eyes burned with fury. His claws dug into the podium as he shouted, his voice breaking the silence. "This is not over. No slave, no girl, no prize is worth this. The human has cheated death, but he will not cheat me." The crowd erupted, some shouting for Elias's death, others roaring for his freedom. The voices clashed like thunder, shaking the hall with division. Elias swayed on his knees, his vision darkening. He whispered through blood-stained lips, his eyes still locked on the girl. "Not yet, I'm not done." And though he could barely move, the fire in his gaze burned brighter than ever. The arena was a storm of voices, half the crowd roaring for Elias's death, the other half chanting for his victory. The fallen champion lay broken in the dust, his weapon dark and lifeless. Elias knelt nearby, barely able to stand, blood soaking his torn shirt. His breaths shallow, but his eyes stayed fixed on the girl in the cage. The reptilian auctioneer slammed his claw against the podium. His grin was gone, replaced by raw fury. "This is not how it ends. A human cannot shame my hall, cannot shame me." His voice carried across the arena, silencing even the loudest of the crowd. Guards began to pour into the pit, their weapons glinting, armor clanking with each step. They surrounded Elias, spears aimed at his chest. Above them, the girl screamed, shaking the bars of her cage. "No, you promised. He won." Her voice cracked, but no one listened. The auctioneer's smile returned, cold and cruel. "Yes, the human fought well, but he paid with his life, did he not? Look at him, broken, dying. His final bid is complete. His life belongs to us." The crowd stirred, restless, uncertain. Some shouted in agreement, others booed, anger rising at the twisted words. But the auctioneer raised his claw for silence. His authority, though shaken, still weighed heavy. Elias pushed himself to his feet, trembling but unbowed. His voice came, rough, broken, yet clear enough to echo through the hall. I am not dead. I am still standing. And until I fall, my life is mine. The words struck like lightning. The crowd erupted again, this time louder, their division sharper. Many shouted, for the auctioneer to honor the deal. Others demanded Elias's execution. The hall trembled beneath their fury. The auctioneer's eyes narrowed. He saw the danger now, not Elias's body, but his defiance. This human, standing broken yet unyielding, was no longer just entertainment. He was becoming a symbol, and symbols could ignite rebellion. The reptilian's grin turned into a snarl. Very well, he hissed. If you will not die, then I will make you. He raised his claw high. Kill him. The guards advanced, spears glinting. Elias swayed where he stood, his fists clenched, his body trembling. He had no weapon, no strength left, but he planted his feet in the dirt. He would not kneel. Above, the girl's voice cut through the noise, desperate and fierce. He gave his life for me. If you take him now, you dishonor your own word. Is your power so weak that you must lie before your people? Her words struck the crowd harder than Elias's had. Murmurs rose into shouts, the audience turning against the auctioneer. Honor the deal, honor the bid! Their voices thundered, shaking the walls. The reptilian froze, his claws tapping against the podium in fury. Elias staggered but raised his voice again, forcing strength into his broken lungs. I gave my life for her freedom. If you will not keep your word, then let it be seen by all. Let every soul here know you are nothing but a coward hiding behind lies. The crowd erupted louder than ever, alien voices of every pitch and tone united in anger, their chants filling the air. Free them! Free them! The auctioneer slammed his claw down, hissing with rage, but the sound was drowned by the storm of voices. His control was slipping, his authority crumbling before his eyes. The girl's cage lowered farther, settling on the arena floor. She gripped the bars, her eyes locked on Elias, filled with tears and fire. The guards hesitated, unsure, their eyes flicking between the human, the girl, and the roaring crowd. The auctioneer's chest heaved, his scales bristling. His voice came out as a growl. Then I will end this myself. He leapt from the podium, his massive form landing with a thud in the arena. Dust rose around him, his claws gleaming in the light. His eyes burned with hatred as he advanced on Elias. The crowd fell silent, holding its breath. Elias, broken and bleeding, lifted his head. His lips curled into a faint, grim smile. Finally, the reptilian auctioneer's heavy steps echoed across the arena as he advanced on Elias. His scaled body gleamed under the golden lights, and his claws stretched like blades ready to tear. His eyes burned with fury, his mouth twisting into a cruel grin. You should have died in silence, human. Instead, you defy me before my people. I will rip you apart with my own hands. The crowd was silent now, every voice stilled by the sight of their master stepping down into the pit. All eyes fixed on Elias, standing broken, battered and bleeding, yet still upright. His legs trembled, his chest rose and fell in jagged breaths, but his gaze never faltered. He whispered under his breath, so low only he could hear. One last fight. The girl gripped the bars of her cage, her eyes wide with terror. No. Please, she whispered. But her voice was drowned by the quiet tension pressing on every heart in the arena. The auctioneer struck first. His claw lashed out faster than Elias expected. It tore across his arm, leaving deep gashes that burned with pain. Elias stumbled back, his blood dripping onto the dust. The reptilian roared, his voice shaking the air. You are nothing. You have nothing. Empty hands, empty pockets, empty life. Elias's chest heaved. His vision blurred, but his voice came steady, cutting through the silence. And yet I stand, and you fear me. The words struck harder than any blow. The crowd stirred, whispers spreading like fire. The auctioneer snarled, his pride burning hotter than his rage. He lunged again, his claws aimed for Elias's throat. Elias fell back, rolling aside. His body screamed with pain, his wounds tearing wider, but he forced himself to move. His hand brushed against the broken shard still lying in the dirt. He snatched it up, its cracked edge cutting into his palm. With the last of his strength, he rose. The auctioneer turned, striking again. Elias ducked low, the claw grazing his back, and drove the shard into the reptilian's side. The auctioneer roared, staggering, blood spraying, but his fury only grew. His massive tail whipped around, catching Elias across the chest and throwing him to the ground. Dust filled the air as Elias struggled to rise, his arms trembling beneath him. The crowd gasped, some shouting for the human to stay down, others urging him to rise again. The girl screamed, slamming her fists against the bars. "Don't give up!" Elias pushed himself to his knees, then to his feet. His body swayed, his vision swam, but he lifted the shard once more. His eyes locked on the auctioneer. "If my life is all I have, then I give it gladly." The reptilian roared, charging with claws wide. The ground shook beneath his weight, his eyes blazing with hatred. Elias did not retreat. He ran forward. A broken man charging death itself. The two collided in the center of the arena. Claws slashed, stone cracked, blood spilled. Elias's shard pierced again and again into the reptilian's chest, even as claws ripped across his body. The crowd roared, half in awe, half in horror, as the human and the monster tore into each other with nothing held back. Finally, with a last cry that ripped from the depths of his soul, Elias drove the shard deep into the auctioneer's throat. The reptilian's eyes went wide, his roar caught in silence. He staggered, clawing at the wound, then collapsed to the ground with a thunderous crash. The arena froze. Silence pressed heavy over every being in the hall. The mighty auctioneer, ruler of the house, lay dead in the dust at the hands of a human with nothing but a broken shard. Elias swayed, blood dripping from his wounds, his strength gone. He looked up at the girl one final time. She was crying openly, now, her hands reaching for him through the bars. He tried to smile, though his lips were stained with blood. "You're free." Then his knees buckled, and he collapsed beside the lifeless body of the auctioneer. The silence broke. The crowd erupted, their voices thundering, some shouting in disbelief, others cheering with wild fury. Guards hesitated, uncertain now, their master dead, and the people divided. The girl screamed his name, her voice breaking through the storm. The fate of the human and the girl now hung in the balance. The auction hall was chaos. The mighty reptilian lay dead, his scaled body sprawled across the arena floor. The crowd, once united in laughter, now tore into divided roars. Some shouted, for vengeance, others for freedom. Guards froze, their weapons raised but their will uncertain. The death of their master had broken the order of the hall. In the center of it all, Elias lay crumpled beside the corpse, his chest barely rising. Blood stained the dirt beneath him, his breath shallow and ragged. His eyes flickered, heavy with exhaustion, yet they still sought the cage where the girl stood. Her chains rattled as she pressed against the bars, her voice trembling but fierce. "He gave his life, honor it, free us!" The crowd turned, their fury no longer directed at her or Elias, but at the system itself. For years they had been forced to watch, forced to cheer while innocents were sold like objects. Now, before their eyes, a single human had broken that chain. His empty pockets had shamed their riches. His broken body had toppled their master. One of the guards, scales dark and armor dented, lowered his weapon. His voice carried low but clear. The deal was made. He paid with his life. The girl is free. Others hesitated, then dropped their weapons too. The balance of power shattered. The people cheered, their voices rolling like thunder. "Free her! Free her!" The cage door creaked open. The girl stumbled out, her legs weak from weeks of captivity. She rushed across the arena floor, her chains dragging behind her until she fell to her knees beside Elias. Her trembling hands cupped his bloodied face. "Stay with me," she whispered, tears streaking down her glowing skin. "Please stay with me." Elias's lips parted, a faint breath escaping. His voice was barely a whisper. "I told you, you're free." Her tears fell onto his chest as she shook her head. "Not without you. I will not be free without you." The crowd hushed, every soul leaning forward, drawn into the moment. The human who had walked into their hall with nothing, who had stood against monsters, who had offered his own life for hers, now lay at the edge of death. The girl pressed her, glowing hands against his wounds. Her people's gift, long forbidden in the auction house, was healing. Light spilled from her palms, seeping into his broken flesh. She poured everything she had into him, her own life force trembling on the edge. "Take it," she whispered. "Take mine if you must." Elias gasped, his body arching with pain and light. The crowd cried out as the glow spread through him, knitting wounds, closing cuts, pushing death away. His breathing steadied, his chest rising stronger. Slowly, his eyes opened, meeting hers once more. "You—" His voice broke, but a faint smile touched his lips. "You saved me." Her tears turned to laughter, soft and relieved, as she leaned her forehead against his. "We saved each other." The arena exploded with cheers, not of mockery, but of triumph. Aliens of every kind rose to their feet, chanting not for the auctioneer, not for blood, but for freedom. Guards dropped their spears, chains clattered to the ground, and the hall that had once been a prison became a place of revolt. Elias pushed himself up with her help, his strength still fragile but his spirit unbroken. He looked around at the roaring crowd, then back at the girl who had refused to let him die. His hand found hers, their fingers locking together. The auction house, once ruled by cruelty, was no more. Its walls had seen the end of an empire of chains. And it began not with riches, not with armies, but with a human who had nothing to give but himself. Together, Elias and the girl walked from the arena, the chains falling away behind them. The crowd parted like a tide, their voices rising as one. In that moment, the human's final bid was not only her freedom, but the freedom of all who had ever been bound. And as they stepped into the light beyond the hall side by side, the galaxy would never forget the man with empty pockets who bought freedom with his life and lived.